Hello everyone, now you will hear a short retelling of the movie John Q. Enjoy watching. At the beginning of the movie we see a girl trying to overtake a truck. This led to an accident. A truck at full speed crashed into a car. Next we meet the Marchbold family whose car was confiscated by the bank for non-payment of the loan. The factory where John works is constantly idle. The man unsuccessfully tries to find 2 jobs. And his wife always accuses him of not doing anything. Mike overheard the parents' conversation and offered Bata to take his $46, which he had saved from his pocket money. After his shift at the factory, John put on a tie. He hopes to get a promising job, but as many as 400 people apply for one place. Every Sunday the family attends church, but Mike couldn't wait to get out of here as soon as possible, because today he has an important baseball game. Mike hit the ball nicely and ran to second base. But suddenly the boy stopped and, clutching his heart, fell to the ground. His parents immediately ran up to him. John, without waiting for the ambulance, threw his son into the car and drove him to the hospital. Michael immediately began to help, asking his parents a few questions. They were asked to leave the ward. John was immediately asked for his insurance number. A little later, the Archibalds were allowed to visit their son, Sniper One.
I am unable to talk right now.
The weekend boy immediately switched off. The Archibalds met with Rebecca, the head of the department, and the chief cardiac surgeon. Raymond said that Michael's heart is 3 times larger than normal, and some of the blood is absorbed by the lungs like a sponge. His heart can no longer be cured, only a transplant will help. Otherwise, Michael will die.
Every day he slept, he wanted more and more water. One day he will not sleep and he will never wake up.
Without surgery, the child will live only a few months, or maybe days. John firmly stated that they did not agree to the transplant, no matter how risky the operation was. Alas, John's insurance does not cover its cost. The family needs to find $250,000 as soon as possible, and Michael will only be put in the queue when his parents deposit the first $75,000 at the factory. John learned that because he had been working fewer hours lately. Without notifying him, he was transferred to another insurance scheme, so the maximum payment he can count on is $20,000. Social services did not help the family because both parents work Archibalds. They went through all possible authorities, but they were refused everywhere. The friend now gives Dennis all her tips. The family sells equipment and furniture, and in the church they collect donations for Michael's operation. In the hospital, the couple saw the family saying goodbye to the girl, who is like this. Got a new heart. John told his story to a journalist to help cover the country. With each passing day, Michael's testimony is getting worse. John sold everything he could, a color TV for $20 and even a diamond wedding ring for $100. Dennis called from the hospital and told her husband that Michael was being discharged tomorrow. He will die.
You and your girlfriend will hear it and do something.
The next day, John came to the hospital and begged Raymond to do the surgery. He'll find the money, he just needs time. John swears he'll get every cent back.
Children, fold your hands well. I did everything in my power. I'm sorry.
John shoved the doctor into the emergency room and pointed a gun at him, then hung a chain on the door. When the other people saw the weapon, panic began. Many managed to escape, and the rest also became prisoners of John. One of the patients had an injured hand, the other a woman. She will give birth. John announced that today they will all receive medical care for free under the table. He'd terrified administrator. The patients are nervous. They are all waiting for help, including a woman who speaks only Spanish. The victim was brought to the department with a gunshot wound. John pointed a gun at the paramedics and ordered them to get out of here. He needs surgery urgently. John had a heart surgeon take care of it. A security guard saw an unknown man smashing the security cameras and called the police. A lot of cops had pulled up to the hospital, including Lieutenant Grimes. It is he who will lead the operation. The girl urgently needs to go to the maternity ward. Another victim is waiting for someone to examine her broken arm. Lieutenant Grimes contacted John.
More hostages got injured.
Emergency department.
The papers are all damaged. They are fine.
John has voiced his only demand. He wants his child put on the waiting list for surgery. The victims received first aid. Everyone seemed to calm down. True, John accused the sword of thinking only of himself. His fiancée broke her arm because in his old car, the airbag was installed only on the driver's side. Besides, he was drunk. Meanwhile, Raymond. Is Michi preparing to attack John? He had already gotten a scalpel and some kind of spray. Police Chief Gus Monroe drove up to the hospital and the crowd greeted him like a Hollywood celebrity. Monroe came here to show off in front of the cameras. The experienced lieutenant asked not to interfere with his work.
Old people have their diapers. He's me.
He left them here. John wonders why his son's illness was not discovered before the nurse suggested that it was the insurance company. They pay doctors extra so that they don't order tests. But a timely diagnosis could have saved Michael's heart. The oath of a bureaucrat. She is like this. No brother, already tired of this attitude towards people, called Grams and offered to release some of the hostages. John forgot to break one of the cameras to the hospital, brought Rebecca and showed her the criminal. She confirmed that John's son is now in intensive care. The man demanded that his son be put on the list within an hour, or he would start killing John Sobir. To let go of a pregnant woman and a woman with a child, Mitch began to bull him. He sprayed John's eyes with sprays and brought a scalpel to his shoulder, but in response he got his head in the nose several times with a sword. He shouted to the bride to take a gun, but she, on the contrary, sprayed his eyes and kicked him heartily. It turns out that he has been shaking her for a long time. It was time for revenge. John came to his senses and chained the ball to the battery. In addition to the women, he also released the husband of the pregnant girl. And the hostages told reporters that John was actually a cool guy. Rebecca said that if you help this terrorist, then you can expect riots in all hospitals in 50 million residents with Sheish. There is no insurance at all. The head of security noted on the hospital plan a place where a sniper could be located successfully. All he had to do was lure John to the phone. Sword asked if John had a plan. He replied that no, he hopes. By a miracle they show us the accident again. The young girl Dennis found out what her husband had done and began to blame herself because she constantly demanded that he do something. Rebecca needed to convince the woman to talk to her husband, so she promised that the hospital would pay all the expenses. Michael will get a new heart. The journalist gave John a chance to speak. He argues that ordinary workers have no chance of survival if they find themselves in a similar situation. People have long been divided into varieties. Grams learned that a task force under the command of Monroe is preparing to eliminate the terrorist. Like they shouldn't comply with John's requirements, it will hurt the system. Sniper advancing to position on the ventilation shaft. At the same time, the reporter is preparing to broadcast the conversation between John and Dennis live. The phone rings, and on the other end of the line, John heard his wife. Dennis doesn't even realize that she is being used to eliminate her husband. The woman reported that Mike was already on the list, but unfortunately it seems their son is already dying.
Our poor son, you pray for him, John.
Denise handed the phone to her son. At that moment, journalists received a picture of the conversation between the father and his dying son. Now all of America is watching. Michael is offended at the folder for not moving onto it. A sniper appears and takes aim at the terrorist. John was just telling his son how proud he was that Mars Powers had left. He had just told Dad that Lester loved him, told John he was being shown on TV, and that's when the sniper fired. John was wounded in the arm and fell under the table. But when he saw that the sniper had dropped his rifle, he lunged at him and stuffed his face. Pro learned that the TV crews were able to connect to the hospital cameras because of his failure watched the whole country. We see how the body of the girl is removed from the car. There was a bracelet on her arm, meaning that the deceased agreed to become a donor after death. John was helped, and the reporter and his team were driven away by an angry father demanding that he approach him in person. Lieutenant Grams. John bound the sniper and pulled down his pants. He wonders why he was deceived and planned to be killed. John doesn't really care if he ends up in jail or in the grave. The main thing is to help his son. The crowd supports the man.
I don't want to keep my child's color. He has to bury me.
John agrees to exchange SVO. Son, when Mike is brought to him, he will release all their hostages and surrender the child. A sniper was brought to the compartment on a bed bound. Pushed out, Raymond tells John that only a new heart can save his son now. Then take mine, said the man. He has no other choice, and he is ready to go to the other world. For the sake of the child, everyone tried to dissuade John, but they are going to listen to them, because Michael is such a nice boy. He deserves to live. Raymond agreed to the operation, although his career would be over.
If you have a free heart. Recent trouble.
The body of the deceased girl was brought to the operating room to extract her internal organs as soon as possible. The heart is also suitable for transplantation in the deceased. The same blood type as Michael, John wrote a will in which he bequeathed his heart to Michael, after which he said goodbye to the hostage patients. The man wanted to talk to his son one last time. The boy opened his eyes with difficulty.
They brought me a new heart. Hurry up.
When specifically for you?
John asked his son to always obey his mother, where he should treat girls like princesses and always keep his word. His father forbade Michael to smoke and associate with bad companies. He promised his son that he would always be there.
I love you, son. See you, dear.
The doctor saw that the fact came with information about the donor and ran as fast as he could to the head of the hostages. Doctors learned that all this time John's gun was not loaded, but now one bullet still ended up in the barrel. John lay down on the operating table, ready to pull the trigger. But then his wife contacted him, but Jonah turned off the radio. Then Dennis ran to the department and screaming stopped her husband at the very last moment. After learning about Donar, John immediately released all the hostages, and at the end he went out himself and put the gun on the asphalt. The police immediately arrested him, but it wasn't John. It was pretended by Cunning Hallister to allow his father to attend his son's operations. Grimes guessed it, and told John what would be waiting for him outside. The operation was performed successfully, and the boy's new heart beat. This case stirred up the whole country in America. Rallies began because of the uselessness of the health insurance system. 3 months later, John heard the verdict in his case. He was found not guilty of attempted murder and armed assault, but was found guilty of forcibly restraining John's men. The lawyer promised the Archibalds that the man would receive no more than 35 years. She will try to reduce the term to 2 years. John was put in a police car and approached her. And he said, "Thanks to Dad."